Thank you for coming. I'm Steve Tordo. I am the Director of the Science and Stewardship Program at the Watershed Institute. And thank you for attending the session for addressing non-point source pollution. We have a good panel, actually at every session. Quick shout out to our sponsors for supporting the event. Hopefully keeping the price down at least a little bit. Housekeeping. Some of the obvious stuff for attending a panel. Please silence your devices. During Q&A, I think this is the only mic we have in here, so we do have a virtual attendance, so please try to speak up for that. And then for the virtual users out there, hopefully that are hearing me, use the Q&A function to ask questions. I'll have a little digital device of my own where I can keep track of the questions are going. I'll try to go back and forth when we get to questions. So I'm going to ask Michael and Jeff and anybody else in the room who's Jen, anybody who's comfortable yelling at me to remind me if I don't do that. Any issues, you reach out to Priya Oliveri, who has the unfortunate oversight of this entire event. The program is being recorded and will be provided in the conference app afterward. So I'll move on and thank our speakers for coming. We have Donna.
Sambun Lakana.
I don't have to butcher it now. Sambun Lakana, who is an environmental engineer with US EPA. Has a very long record with the 319 program, which is the non-point source section under the Clean Water Act, which is something that we can't wait for the funds to be funneled into the state so that we can use them to do lots of good work. So really fortunate to have her on the panel. Michael Flood is, it's been done too often. I won't do it to you.
That's me. That's me.
Is a watershed management specialist. Watershed management specialist, yeah. Also for the EPA, provides oversight to New York. Try to do this. He provides oversight to New York's non-point source pollution program, as the 319 program as well. And does technical assistance for New Jersey, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, which is our region, right? Also oversees interstate environmental conditions, water quality monitoring programs. And then definitely not least, lucky enough to have Bob Schuster with us, watershed coordinator at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, with the Office of Assistant Commissioner of Watershed and Land Management. One of the people that our commissioner was nodding to, although he really was beating up Katie for most of the talk, or at least sending a lot of missiles her way. Over 30 years in sample collection, chemical, biological, microbial analysis, as well as data assessment of all state waters. So he has a hand in our AMNet, or ambient monitoring network, and works on a lot of NJDEP special projects, stormwater monitoring, microbial source tracking among them. So I think until we get to the Q&A, that's all you'll hear from me. And with that, I'll hand it over to our first speaker.
Thank you very much.
This seems to be working.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for having us here today, everyone, and thank you all for being here. You know, environmental programs and working in the environment, you know, is very challenging, and we appreciate and welcome all the assistance from every person, and we hope that everybody's focused on educating our young people as well. It's a constant change. You know, I leave, Michael comes, you know, we have to constantly keep up to date. Michael and I will be talking today about the non-point source program. That's non-point, one word, no hyphen in the Clean Water Act, just for your information. And we're going to be covering a bunch of different topics and programs. The Clean Water Act Section 319 program is undergoing a revision of its guidelines. And it started a couple of years ago, where headquarters asked the states, territories, tribes, grantees to participate in discussion sessions where we could learn more about the barriers they were facing, about how to implement the program, and, you know, how to get through some of the roadblocks. And so now we're just, we've drafted guidelines and we got some comments back, including from New Jersey. And we're working through these comments and we're just hoping that, we can get a little more flexibility where it's needed. And we also introduced some new topics, climate change and environmental justice, Justice 40 initiative, and also non-point source enforcement programs. So Clean Water Act Section 319 was established in 1987, and it provides a framework and federal funds for non-point source mitigation. It is a drop in the bucket, but it's here. And we have it. Requires states and territories and tribes to provide non-point source assessment management programs and update those programs every 5 years. So initially, when the program first began, everybody had to do an assessment of the state or tribe or area, wherever there were. And then they developed non-point source management program plans to implement the implement their programs. And then annually, they would provide work plans for the funds. And this is the old guidance link, okay? It also phased out the construction grants program years ago and established the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which is a big source of funds. Oops, okay. So just to go over point sources, any discernible, confined, and discrete conveyance, including but not limited to any pipe, ditch, channel, tunnel, conduit, well, discrete fissure, container, rolling stock, that's those what you see on the train tracks, concentrated animal feeding operation or vessel or other floating craft from which pollutants are may be discharged. It does not include agricultural stormwater discharges and return flows from irrigation. And non-point source is not defined in the Clean Water Act, believe it or not, but it is described as when rainfall, snowmelt, or irrigation water runs over or penetrates the land, picking up and transporting pollutants, which are then carried and deposited into rivers, lakes, groundwaters, estuaries, and ocean. Non-point sources are not federally regulated, but states can regulate them if they choose. Here's a breakup of what EPA estimates. Non-point sources are about 70% of all waterborne impairments. Non-point source pollutants is the largest water quality impairment that we're facing in the nation. Its cumulative impacts are equivalent to, point source discharges in some cases and can severely degrade water quality. So we hear a lot about MS4 NIPDES program. They call it NJDEP here, NIPDES versus non-point source, MS4s. So I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of how the programs are different. NIPDES regulates discharges from MS4s. MS4s are publicly owned municipal separate storm sewer systems that collect or convey stormwater. MS4 serves between 50 and 100,000 people and involve construction and activities between 1 and 5 acres. 319 did not authorize federal regulations or require any state regulations. State may use non-regulatory or regulatory ways to address non-point source pollution. NIPDES permits are designed to reduce sediment and runoff and requires regulated communities to use best management practices to reduce pollutants to the maximum extent practicable. Whereas 319 funds focus on implementing BMPs to restore impaired waters or protect good quality waters. EPA's General Counsel determined that 319 funds not be used to fund non-point source projects in areas covered by a draft or final NIPDES permit, which is not entirely accurate. It should be that they didn't want 319 funds to be used to fund anything covered under the NIPDES permit, not necessarily in areas. Okay. So non-point source program and grants guidelines, just basic stuff. It provides statutory and regulatory requirements for states and territories to implement non-point source management programs and manage 319 grants. It assures legal and effective use of 319 funds. It includes terms and condition in the grants. It required, past tense, 50% of 319 funds be used for on-the-ground projects. I'll tell you how that changed in a little bit. Requires state to update their non-point source management programs every 5 years and keep them current. It explains the importance of protection as well as restoration, which a lot of people, including New Jersey and a lot of northeastern states, were arguing about many years ago because they felt that the impaired waters, some of these impaired waters, if they dedicated a little funds to them, they would be able to perhaps not have to develop a TMDL. It stresses the importance of funding overburdened areas. It encourages climate considerations for new projects. It requires EPA regions to develop satisfactory progress determinations at the end of a fiscal year after the state has submitted its annual report, so that we can approve their program for the past year and open the door for funding for the next year for them. Okay. Oh, I have to use this. Okay. So the process to address non-point source pollution, as we deal with it at EPA, is you assess the non-point sources in a watershed, and then you adopt practices to control those non-point sources. You develop non-point source management program plans that can address those findings, and you update those plans every 5 years. Of course, developing partnership, leveraging funds and resources are a very important part of this program. The program is diverse, diffuse, dominant. We need all the help we can get. Develop 9-element or plans or alternative watershed plans, total maximum daily load implementation plans, use information from other existing plans like hazard mitigation plans and things like that, and try to use all the existing information that you can to develop these 9-element plans. Now, 9-element plans have, I'm going to go through that later. Award grants to states and local governments, nonprofits, environmental groups, citizens, and businesses to mitigate, demonstrate, protect, and educate about non-point source pollution. You can implement voluntary or non-point source enforcement programs, monitor waters to determine the water quality condition, and then finally to develop non-point source success stories when you have some great results. Non-point source management plans, the flexibilities and expectations. So some of the flexibilities now is to address natural disasters or emergent contaminant concerns, protect healthy waters, to use protection measures with restoration. They removed limited use of 319 project funds, so states can actually use the funds that are proportionate to the needs of their management program, their goals. Source water protection, new emphasis on source water protection. New text includes connection to nutrients, harmful algal blooms, and public health concerns, which we didn't have before. Support state's use of SRF recycled funds as matched. Those are funds that were already given to the state, and the state already committed those funds, and then they were paid back, and now those are called recycled funds. Encourage EPA and states to partner with more with USDA and FEMA, and increase the clarity of statutory and regulatory updates. And some of the expectations now that we are looking for is to include plans to ensure equitable access to program benefits, specify actions to assure climate resilient watershed projects, and the Coastal Zone Act reauthorization amendments is called ZARA. And we want them to report on actions and approve coastal programs. We worked on this many years ago. New Jersey's, one of the last remaining conditions of New Jersey's program was on-site wastewater treatment, which is the most difficult to actually meet. And then we sort of kind of took a break from ZARA for a while, and it wasn't really a focus. And now we're trying to at least have report on that and be more in the forefront. Oops. Okay. Is that it? Okay, so what is flexibility and clarifications when it comes to watershed project funding? So 50% of 319 grant for watershed projects, and this is where it changed a little bit. Watershed plan development, capacity building, demonstration projects in underserved communities, and local watershed coordinators. The funding of local watershed coordinators to implement watershed finance partnerships, utilizing the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Participation in long-term effectiveness monitoring. Funds for in-lake treatment now can be used for in-lake responses to public health and post-upland treatment in certain circumstances. Before, we would not allow any in-lake work until all of the upland sources were addressed. And now with harmful algal blooms and other public health concerns, they're trying to be a little more flexible to address those problems. Clarification. Non-point source regulatory programs can use program and project dollars. They split it in half and half. And it explains BABA. BABA is Build America, Buy America, Made in America laws to bolster American industrial base, protect national security, and support high-paying jobs. It explains Davis-Bacon Act and other cross-cutting environmental compliance laws. Davis-Bacon applies to contractors or subcontractors performing work with federal or DC contracts, and it directs the Secretary of Labor to determine local wage rates. So nobody gets cheated. Some new chapters and national priorities include reduce nutrient pollution, ensure equitable access to non-point source program benefits, protect healthy waters and watersheds, good quality waters, climate resilience, green stormwater infrastructure, natural hazard mitigation, and nature-based solutions. And they also finance watershed coordinators and watershed finance aggregators. Okay, it says here, by collaborating with state, local hazard mitigation planners, both parties can share data and explain the critical water resource areas that are that should be targeted for mitigation and increase the chances of achieving, resilience and water quality co-benefits. Climate considerations, as you've heard the senator speak, and also the commissioner. Natural disasters, we have floods, drought, fires. There's some great work being done with fires in California where they put these monitors up high and they can spot them using artificial intelligence and spot the fires from afar. That's why last fire season you didn't hear as much about fires out there. Source water protection, healthy waters. These are all the different kinds of categories we want to ensure that we protect. BMP design, watershed planning, non-point source management program plans. I don't know if I put that there, but we'll give you access to these slides later. So I'm just going to go over the Coastal Zone Act reauthorization amendments of 1990 really quickly. It was a long, many years. This is a program that is jointly administered by NOAA and EPA. It was enacted in 1990 to restore and protect coastal waters. It required the 29 states with approved Coastal Zone Management Act programs develop a more stringent regulatory regime. It requires CESAR programs delineate how states will implement non-point source pollution controls and management measures in conformity with the 6217 guidance, G guidance, which is on the web. It's a wonderful manual. It's thick like this. It hasn't been updated, but it's still a wonderful manual. CZMA mandates that states implement coastal non-point source program via 319 and NOAA's CZM 306 and 309 programs. But CESAR participation is actually optional, but if you don't participate and you're one of those 29 states, your funding from section 306 and 319 funds will be reduced and distributed to other states, as was with Oregon. Oregon wasn't approved. I think they're approved now. And we had the benefit of collecting a little bit of extra money from Oregon for the years that they were not approved. And another thing about this, the Coastal Zone Act reauthorization amendments, I'll just say ZARA, is that ZARA, you had to have a legal opinion from your council that basically explains how each measure was enforceable. And there was about 54 different measures. Some of those measures were taken away when phase 2 stormwater came in because it had to do with urban areas, urban runoff, and those were absorbed by the NJDEP program. Okay. So these are some of the programs that we deal with a non-point source, and this is just a handful. There's many more. Non-point source is everywhere. It crosses over so many programs. You have green infrastructure, urban waters, National Estuary Program, Clean Water State Revolving Fund. They want us to use the state revolving fund more with non-point sources. Water sense, on-site wastewater treatment, pesticides, atmospheric deposition, source water protection. And then some of the program, some of the agencies that we deal with is NOAA, again, with the coastal program, USDA with the National Water Quality Initiative, which began in 2012. We were very grateful to have USDA agree to do this, and basically we targeted a few watersheds throughout each state. Each state was supposed to have 3 watersheds, and USDA releases a bulletin every year and basically tells us how they want to guide these the next moves that they're going to do, whether they're going to focus on source water, or if you should put one of the waters as a planning and start to move into the implementation phase. And the whole objective for it is to see if we can, get some of these waterways to meet water quality standards. That's specifically agriculture. I'll talk about a couple of other agencies that we deal with in a second. So 9 elements of a watershed plan. These are the 9 elements that everybody's talking about. And this is one way that you can solve, that you can approach, what am I saying? Cleaning a watershed. You can approach mitigating a watershed. And so you identify pollutant sources. That's the first thing you need to do. The nature and extent of the non-point source problem that's causing the pollution. You estimate load reductions, the pollutant load reductions that you need to meet water quality standards. Identify management practices, the BMPs that will achieve the pollutant load reduction. And then D, you have the technical and financial resources, the needed technical and financial resources that you need in order to implement all of the projects that you're planning, education and outreach strategy, implementation schedule, milestones, evaluation criteria, and a monitoring plan, a monitoring component. Now, all of these are very good, but there are a lot of cases where you don't have time to develop a 9-element plan. Emergency could happen where you need to address that. So these are the things that were brought to EPA headquarters attention, and these are the things that they're trying to give you a little bit more flexibility on, even though they're not quite there yet. Not in my opinion, we're almost there. So some clarifications and examples of the flexibility. There's a new expectation for climate resiliency. So if you, have a normal project that you thought, they want you to say, well, where's the high water mark? Where's the problem? Can you make this stronger? Can you make this BMP better, that it could be resilient to climate action? Clarification regarding appropriate geographic scale. The level of detail should be commensurate with a non-point source issue. Examples and clarification of leveraging existing plans like NRCS watershed assessments for NWQI that I mentioned before, or hazard mitigation plans working with FEMA, emergency response. And then there's alternative plans. So even though the guidance says they require you to do 9-element plans, they're also saying, well, you can also have an alternative plan that EPA would allow you to do. And if you submit it to them, and we went over approval process, so it expands the discussion of non-point source emergency response plans. EPA can approve a tribal non-point source management program plan as an alternative to a 9-element plan. Now, tribal programs, we have many throughout the country. They have a separate guidance and they need a lot of help. It's and so for them to allow us to treat their management program plan as a 9-element watershed plan is beneficial for them, because they're usually on very small areas. Usually. The National Water Quality Initiative with USDA that I mentioned earlier, NRCS watershed assessments can be an alternative if addressing only agricultural issues, which is really the whole point of doing this endeavor with EPA, between USDA and EPA. Continued regional review and approval, added flexibility for experienced state programs or for programs in which the state gave a substantial amount of overmatch for the grant. Okay. Total maximum daily loads. Total maximum daily loads are technical plans that explains the methodology used to identify the maximum amount that a particular pollutant can go into a water body and still meet water quality standards. So what's the maximum amount that this pollutant can come into this water body and the water body can still meet water quality standards? They're informational tools that divide pollutant load allocation among sources, and I'll show you a slide next. They're not enforceable. It provides an analysis of sources, pollutant levels, loads, and reductions needed to meet water quality standards. They help prepare for implementation projects via programs and statutory mechanisms, NJDEP permits, and other federal requirements, state, local laws, ordinances, and voluntary actions. So I was looking at New Jersey's integrated report, and I wanted to just put this up there. You know, New Jersey has 127 miles of coastline, 18,000 miles of rivers and streams, and hundreds of acres of lake, ponds, and marshes. And this integrated report provides an in-depth analysis of the health of New Jersey's surface waters. And here's a wonderful tutorial up here that I included. I was starting to look at it, that is worth looking at. Findings. So the statewide trends over a 35-year period show the total phosphorus and total nitrogen improving. Nitrate, total dissolved oxygens, and chloride show increased concentrations. And one of the reasons I think is wastewater treatment plants oxidize the ammonia and it forms nitrate and increases its concentrations. Ammonia is more harmful due to its uptake of oxygen and leaving the water depleted of oxygen and toxicity to aquatic life. The Northeast water region shows increasing TDS and chloride impairment, total solids and chloride impairment compared to other regions. Let me just see something here. Runoff from urban areas, including road salt to control ice, is likely the cause. Total phosphorus and nitrogen have improved since the 1980s as wastewater discharges now provide secondary treatment. And New Jersey's NJDEP permits ensure proper treatment and discharge of wastewater, and DEP's nonpoint source program and local stewardship activities have reduced pollution from stormwater runoff. And this is only 2 slides of New Jersey's integrated report. These are some of the actions that New Jersey had put in their report to improve water quality. And I won't go through them all, but they're all just right up our alley and everything even included in our 9 elements. New Jersey received in 2023 a total allocation of $2,800,000 for the nonpoint source program, Section 319 funds. New Jersey's nonpoint source program combines regulatory controls, non-regulatory strategies, targets funding, and implements restoration protection actions in watershed plans, based plans. New Jersey has the fertilizer law, stormwater rules, harmful algal bloom prevention and control, routinely announces requests for proposals, develop a climate resilience strategy, and promulgated an EJ law requiring environmental impact statements, and developed an EJ mapping tool. So New Jersey is one of my favorite states to work with. This is just a quick slide to show you from its inception in 1990 where the money has gone, just to let you know that we started out with about, a meager 38 or $50 million nationally. It went as high as 237 during the Clinton and Gore years when we had the Clean Water Action Plan. And now we're at about 182. So we're significantly lower than what we were, 20 years ago, which is not good. Just to mention a little bit about the state revolving fund, the total assistance for project categories that New Jersey received was $7 billion. And this is the breakdown: decentralized wastewater treatment, stormwater, energy conservation, water conservation, and clean water funds that impact estuaries. And non-point source, these are the categories that they list for us under non-point source: groundwater, which isn't covered in the Clean Water Act, brownfield, sanitary, and hydro modification. And the total here is $767 million. So you could see that program is much better funded. And The grants reporting and tracking system is a database for the nonpoint source program. And we're also allowing other programs like 604B and other funded programs where there's no repository for the data to go to use the grants reporting and tracking system. We would also allow the states to develop a success story that may not have even include Section 319 funding, but just to make sure that we understand that these nonpoint source projects are working and that we can actually achieve water quality improvement and reach water quality standards. So grant recipients enter details about the individual projects, activities funded using Section 319 funds or other funding sources. GRITS provides models to calculate non-point source load reduction so states can demonstrate how water quality improvements are achieved. State grant recipients report their annual progress in meeting its milestones. GRITS retrieves grant information from EPA centralized grants as the databases are starting to talk to each other now, and financial databases like the Financial Data Warehouse. And GRITS also enables EPA and states to report accomplishments that they use during 319 funds. EPA uses the system to respond to inquiries received from Congress, the White House, and various constituent groups. And quickly, I wanted to mention the push now for us to be working with the Department of Defense, the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program under FEMA. And these are the places I found in New Jersey that you can work with here. The Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program preserves military missions by supporting cost sharing, agreements between military services and other federal agencies, state, local governments that limit military activities and increase resilience to climate change. So basically private conservation to avoid land use conflicts, basically near military installations. And hazard mitigation resilience resources here. They have some great webinars and stuff. So I tried to put a few things down here that you can access. And then lastly, I did FEMA funded projects just to show and compare it with New Jersey DEP funded projects in the same area. This one happens to be in Hoboken. It's one of the most densely populated cities in the United States. It's impacted by significant flooding due to concentration of pervious surfaces, limited open spaces. So basically this project is the expansion of Southwest Resiliency Park, increases underground stormwater storage capacity to reduce property damage in that area and economic losses from flood. The expansion involves water detention, pumping, and the implementation of green infrastructure features that connect with the stormwater system. New Jersey implements green infrastructure features in MS4 areas and also try to focus on environmental justice areas at the same time. And that's how they fund their program. You know, New Jersey is an MS4 state, and we're told you're not supposed to use it in MS4 state. But if you go above and beyond the requirements of the NJDEP permit, which is what New Jersey's calling green infrastructure project, then we're okay. This will alleviate strain on wastewater treatment plants and reduce the combined sewer overflows that benefit residents of North Hudson sewage. So that's the FEMA portion. You see how it's funded $6 million. And then New Jersey funded $500,000 project. And what this project entails is 22,000 gallon capacity tanks that would mitigate the flooding and public health risks. And that the goal of this project is to delay the storage discharge goal to Hoboken's combined sewer overflow and reduce the amount of events and discharge to the Hudson River, which is significant. In Hoboken, CSO events occur about 5 times per month, it's stated, and this plan seeks to lower that to 4 or 5 times per year. Another project, FEMA in Jersey City. This one is FEMA funded $3,800,000, almost $4 million in McGovern Park. It's a residential area with single family and 2 family homes that's subject to a lot of floods. The project reduces flood risk by installing another stormwater park subsurface storage capacity of 30,000 cubic feet. It should mitigate damage for 5, 10, 25-year events and mitigate flooding for 50 and 100-year events. The proposed solution accounts for factors such as sources of flooding, ground elevation, surface slope, impervious surfaces, available spaces. And then in New Jersey, not too, just a few blocks away from this is funding another project for $770,000, which is to reduce, let's see. Yeah, working with Rutgers, they're actually doing shovel-ready projects. I knew they weren't going to do another tank here. Shovel-ready projects, tree trenches, curb extensions, and 770,000. So they're working together, and that's what we really want to see. And then the last project I picked up for you was this, the Watershed Institute was also funded. And its main goal is to produce comprehensive condition assessment of New Jersey's waterways. And it intends to harness the power of community water monitoring organizations and foster new ones to produce water quality data of sufficient quality. And their 5 goals are to facilitate communication, information exchange, to increase the quality of volunteer collected data, to develop and maintain consistent methods between volunteer programs, to expand the geographic range of HUC 14 monitoring coverage. New Jersey deals with HUC 14s. Most people deal with HUC 12, and which is a larger area. New Jersey has a very densely populated state, so it's easy for them to work with the HUC 14. And then lastly, to improve the sustainability of volunteer monitoring programs for continued monitoring activities, which Bob will talk a little bit about soon. And here's the project links if you want to know more about those projects that I just gave you. And then Michael, I think I'm gonna,
Sure.
here's your thing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Because they were a little bit past halfway through the time.
Okay.
Is it really? Did it take
If we
you?
could, if we could do it in like.
Okay. You
Yeah,
can
we'll
zip
be
through.
quick. We'll be
We
quick.
got a lot
Yeah.
of pictures in secondhand.
Thank you, Donna. And so my name is Mike Flood. Yes, I know, a great name to be working in the water field, so you can't forget me. And just as Dan talked about in some of the opening remarks, is you got to highlight your successes, right? What's working, highlight what is working, and also make an assessment of what is not working. How do we constantly go back and forth, see what's working, what's not working. And how we do that in the nonpoint source program, as Donna mentioned before, is uploading projects into the grants reporting and tracking system. And some of those projects have, based on pre-monitoring and post-monitoring data from when the project was installed, if it shows improvements in water quality, it's eligible for a success story. And we have success stories from all across the country. If you go onto the EPA's nonpoint source website, you'll see the highlights for the success stories, a nice 2-page little document for all the stories produced across the country. So that's one way to get different ideas and see what's working and seeing measurable reductions. And in New Jersey, this is just a quick slide. Basically New Jersey has been really good at reporting out on successes with their nonpoint source projects. Stemming from one of the really earlier ones in 2010, right around this area in the Millstone. And it's based on water quality the parameters, or improvements in parameters. So whether it's bacteria, whether it's phosphorus, sediment, a water body can have multiple impairments. So there could be multiple improvements. And a lot of them focus on stormwater projects and or green infrastructure retrofits, and then all the way up, to even larger rivers like in the Raritan River, reducing nutrients. So kind of like, why are we all here today? I'm sure many of you are like, okay, we've got all these different, ideas going on, but where do I start? What am I looking at? If I'm a mayor in a town, if I'm a planner in a town, I don't even, really know where to start. I may not even have the engineering capacity to look at some of this stuff. I know one of the questions earlier on today was saying, we have some people interested, but like none of us are engineers. So how do we even begin to think about managing our stormwater? And EPA has thought about this a little bit, and it started a few years ago. And, in government, we're always, open, there's audits that go on from our Government Accountabilities Office, our Office of Inspector General. And ultimately, that's a time and a, agency or organization that reviews what the government is doing, see if we can make improvements, if there are, areas of lacking. And one couple of years ago was the GAO, again, government acronyms, letters, alphabet soup. But it identified that municipalities really don't know where to begin with stormwater, especially green infrastructure, right? We're really good at gray infrastructure. We have our gray, engineering controls. We know how to lay pipes, but this green infrastructure terminology is kind of newer to us. It's harder to design because it takes into biological life, right? Plantings, it takes into account natural slope, it takes account to soils, right? So it's a lot more in-depth of a process because each BMP or best management practice or green infrastructure technique will be dependent on the site. It's not necessarily cookie cutter, one site fits all. And so EPA just released, if you have your smartphones, scan the QR code. I believe it still works. I tested it earlier today, but it's this biodigestion design handbook. So basically it takes, what those questions are. Where do we start? How do we even start thinking about this? What are the types of projects? And puts it into this, it's a, over 100-page document with lots of visual tools, and also design features of how to go about, it doesn't go into the nitty-gritty of the calculations, but high level engineering features and calculations on what do we do? What projects do we put in the ground? What does this even look like? What is the universe of our practices that we can use? And this is also as an advent of a lot of our success stories. What successes have we been seeing? What have we been having, right? And that gets back to my first slide, which is those non-point source success stories. Not only is that showing of what's working, what's not working, those success stories also go up to Congress through, in congressional reviews to show Congress that our program is working, keep on funding us. But it also helped us to identify some of the, good practices to put in this complication of a design handbook. So it's all accessible on EPA website, non-point source website, EPA NPS, or you can scan it on the QR code here. And what does this kind of look like? It goes through all kind of designs. It lays everything out kind of step by step of what you need to look at when you're designing specific projects. From design elements to taking account of the holistic nature, not just the one project itself, but what's going on in your surrounding watershed. What are some things you need to think about? Calculating the volume. Where is the volume coming from? What kind of impervious cover we have? What kind of land use do we have? Managing what's going on in that drainage area. Geometry and sizing, a little bit of physics, right? Because these are not hard structures. These are more natural structures, soft structures. You got to think about the shape. You got to think about the soils involved. Do we have to bring in special soils for allowed drainage or gravel? Capture, pre-treatment. Are we slowing the water down before it comes down into our basins to not only extend the life of our basin, but also help with operation and maintenance? Vegetation, types of vegetation, what plants are going to work in these certain situations? You need plants that are drought tolerant, but also wet tolerant, right? Or in different circumstances based on your soil type. I like to think of, my own point of view is the right plant in the right place. You're not going to plant a cactus in a rain garden, just not going to work. So you want to, utilize proper vegetation that'll work. But also it goes into discussing like the community outreach. And that's kind of what Dan was getting at in the beginning, is that, you want to use these as, highlighting tool, educational tool of what's going on. So we could put this in, but you also want to talk about it a little bit and get the public engaged with it, so that it's not just all of us here standing in a room talking about the same thing that we all kind of know about, right? It's to get the information out there to the people that don't know, that want to learn. And then you have more support in your communities and your municipalities to do more of these projects, which are all outlined in the book. And then also long-term operation and maintenance, because anything you install, whether it's green infrastructure, gray infrastructure, there's always maintenance that's involved. And I know we're a little running short on time, but there's a lot of things that the book does go into that talks about, it's getting in the infiltration and the physics. And just some high level, design ideas is rooftop gardens, stopping the stormwater where it's generated on flat roofs. Porous asphalt. Do we need to have a whole parking lot that is complete pavement? Is there a way to infiltrate that water so it's not running off the surface? Whether it's porous asphalt or those honeycomb structures, getting the water down. Here's a favorite picture. You see this road, there's no curb, right? That water is going off into the landscape, into one of our rain gardens here. It's not staying on the road surface, going into the storm drain, gray infrastructure, storm drain, going into, not going into pipes, it's going into indentation in the ground with vegetation to filter. Thinking about on a more regional scale, conservation within a, subdivisions, right? Having more plantings, more vegetation covers. Not only does it provide shading for heat, but also water absorption, reducing flooding, as opposed to a typical subdivision where everything is clear cut. And often those soils are compacted, which means it can't hold as much water. Promoting run on the property for infiltration into the ground. Taking, if you do have, non-porous asphalt, running it down into drainage basins, providing areas for where it can be held, that's the retention, and then infiltrated. Again, different roof gardens and more retention basins. Also, they're aesthetically pleasing. People will see that. They don't just see a mowed lawn, they may see a rain garden, they may see a pond. That's also getting out that educational and that outreach to inform the public. There's some more useful resources and tools and some more links. We'll hopefully have this posted online for more people to view.
Yeah,
Thank you.
all of the presentations will be available at least in the short term through the online app to connect them to the Zoom link. But I'm sure we'll have everything being recorded and posted for you.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me here. I'm going to be talking about addressing non-point source pollution, but coming from a completely different angle. They were covering so well the grant process, funding process, everything else. We didn't want to duplicate things, so I'm going to be covering it. Looking at it from where I originally came from was a lot of water quality monitoring, but how to link and some of the issues that you see between non-point source and point source. I think Dan said it this morning very well. I think we have to acknowledge that everybody in the room at some level, we all want to achieve the Clean Water Act. We all want things clean. Everybody wants that. It's how do we communicate that and work together to achieve it? I want to say, if you pull data out of the portal and look how many stations exist in New Jersey, we have on average 1.5 stations per square mile when you pull all that out over 20 years plus. That's a wealth of information that can tell us a lot of information. But we all know we have both the point and non-point source that was talked about very well, and covered. But we also acknowledge that non-point source is a big, cause of our water quality impairments. But sometimes it can be really hard to separate. That's something that everybody has to deal with. And what I'm going to cover, as the definition came up, and it was covered by Donna, there's two different, definitions. You have what's running off from precipitation, but you also have what's going through, the conduit, the confined spaces, the pipes and the outfalls. But I think, but the issue comes in, a lot of what's draining into that stormwater system is non-point source. So in a way, they overlap and they link. And this is something we need to keep in mind, especially when you're looking at best management practices, because that green infrastructure was just talked about. If you can reduce what's coming off that land and getting into the stormwater system, it's also going to help the MS4 process. So there is that overlap and connection. And I think we have to acknowledge too, in many cases, that you can go to one area and you're going to have a combination of sources. They're not all going to be the same. They're not all going to be MS4 and they're not all going to be non-point. And how to address those could be completely different. So we need to evaluate, the links between the two, what we're seeing, because of that wealth of data that we have. We have so much of it, we can go back and look and we can compare it to rainfall, all different types of river flows, all meteorological data. What is causing it? We need to evaluate gaps. Sometimes we can have a water quality impairment in one spot, but 5 miles away, it's not bad. What's happening between those two? If it's a river that's flowing. We may need to follow up with some additional sampling. We may need to do special projects. New Jersey DEP with certain programs, we certainly go after, projects. If we know pathogens in shellfish waters cause a downgrade, we're going to do special projects to try to find out where that's coming from, and try to remediate it right away. One of the big things that I want to put out there, and Dan had talked about it this morning, you need that effective communication, because to design studies, to get more data, to do this, it creates a partnership. There is no one group that is ever going to have the staff to address everything. So participatory science, with the citizens, that's a component. It needs to be a component. How we work together, how, federal, state, municipal, county, the governments have to work together. In the end, we all want to see the water clean up, but we have to communicate and work together to accomplish that. If we're always butting heads, we're not going to get very far. So I'm going to give an example. There's 5 components to, source track down, which is a big thing. But the key is it's very simple steps on how we do it. You start at the bottom of the pyramid, and whether it's the integrated report, shellfish waters, we have impairments, and that's what we're trying to address. But what are the causes of those impairments? You go up that chain. There's going to be a session on GIS tools. You want to know what are the potential sources in that area that are causing that impairment. What can you do to address them? You want to know when they're impaired. Is it wet versus dry? 2 different solutions. So those are things that have to be looked at. May need special projects that we dive into, and then may need specialized testing and pathogens to find what that source is. But in the end, it's taking all of that data in the scientific weight of evidence and saying, here's what the problem is, here's what we know, and here's how we're going to address it. So an example, in 2015, we have an orange area right here. These are all of our routine ambient stations. We downgraded to pathogens, 546 acres of shellfish waters. So that was degrading water quality that we'd never seen before. When we looked at the data, what can we also say? This is what the levels look like when you get 24 hours of rainfall. So there's clearly a rainfall impact. So we know there's going to be a non-point source component. We know there's going to be an MS4 component. There's a lot of things going on. So what did we do? We designed special project sampling where along these developed areas, a lot of it are by stormwater outfalls. See ambient water in front of the outfalls. We also have tributaries coming in. We have lakes up here that we sample in front of the outflow, a creek coming down. So we try to sample to capture what's coming out of those. This is what it looked like when we went out in 2016, and this was before a rain event. So this is what our fecal coliform levels were. So I would like people, kind of focus on this 55 area, but also focus on these outfalls down in this bottom portion. Those were also issues, two different things. When it rained, immediately after a half inch of rain, look at 55. We're bordering on fecal coliform at 15,000 to 100,000. You start to see around some of the stormwater, in front of the stormwater outfalls, we're seeing popping. So depending upon where you are, you don't have the outfalls by 55. That's the outflow of a small lake and a stream that flows into that lake. Two different things, one water body. As an hour later, we sampled it again. You could see you still have those levels in these coves, but you also have 55 is still elevated. 2 hours later, you could see that the rainfall, once that rain stopped and those outfalls stopped flowing, the level started to decrease very rapidly within a few hours. But you can see this lake did not decrease. I will go forward a month later. We went out and did a stormwater event. Again, this is the ambient before the event. Now where we used to have that right up by 55, we don't have it. That's gone. And there will be a reason why that I will talk about in a minute. But when it rains, you can still see stormwater impacts. So this is first flush at 1/10 of an inch of rain. But 55, we're not seeing that hit anymore up in 55. You go an hour past the first flush, you still see some stormwater impacts on the south shore, but we're not seeing that 55. 2 hours pass. We're seeing that same pattern. You see everything start to reduce a little bit from the stormwater flow. This is what it looked like when you go by stations. So even though we have all of those stations around that water body, they're not all the same. They all don't respond the same, even in wet versus dry, even under different conditions. But you can see that 55 was really high on one event. And then on that next event, it was really low on the rain event. Reason why? We worked with our county, with the health department, with Department of Agriculture, had Monmouth County looked around first. There was a homeowner that had a small stall that was boarding some horses in it. They were decided to use all the stall muckings as fill around the top edge of the lake, which is right up from where the spillway is going down from the lake into the river. So Monmouth County, they got a visit from Department of Agriculture, they got a visit from Monmouth County Health Department, and they got a visit from New Jersey DEP Land Use Enforcement. No fines were levied. The person just did not realize that this could be a problem. So what happened was that weekend before we sampled in July, where we did not see those high hits, that was actually that weekend, they reported in that was all cleaned up and done away with, and we did not see the high hits. So that was a small local. There's still those stormwater impacts and those other impacts that are being addressed, and we continue to work in Navissing. But at the same time, we have a community monitoring program going on there with Clean Ocean Action, citizens. We have a municipalities committee where all of the reps from all the municipalities around Navissing meet monthly, and we go over the most recent data, and we take the citizen data and we use that to identify where we're going to do more intensive monitoring. So it's very beneficial to be working as a team because we're going a long way. And in our last report, we are seeing water quality improvements overall in the shellfish waters. We still have work to do, but it is improving. Just 2 more slides really quick. This was an area in Puerto Republic. There was a bathing beach here a couple of years ago. This is a tidal creek that flows. This is a lake outlet. It flows down. It's tidal. That beach was never closed before. And then one year we got a phone call that they were closed the entire summer due to pathogens. Happened to be 2019. We had the wettest year on record in 2018. Spring was very wet. They had problems. We went in, designed a study, did the same thing. What we found is these yellow circles off on the side. That's where there was massive amounts of dog waste found. People were walking dogs and nobody was picking up. On average, a dog in one day, and when you average it all out, produces 5 billion fecal coliforms a day. So that is something interesting. In this orange area, they had unbelievable number of geese because people just love to feed the geese and they like to take their kids to the beach and say, feed the geese, it's fun. There was a lot of goose waste. Then we have the red area was a creek that drained out right next adjacent to the beach, failing old cesspool systems on houses that are well over 100 years old. And one of the solutions that we actually recommended was sheriff came in and said, pick up after the dogs or nobody's going to be allowed to walk their dogs there anymore. They worked with Fish and Wildlife. We went to town council meetings. They worked with Fish and Wildlife to remove the geese and start to take care of the goose problem. And then all we did with the septics is said, they probably were never pumped out. Can you at least maintain what you have? And they put out letters, trucks were all over the place, and knock wood, since then, the beach is not closed. So they went from closed all summer to nothing. But there were a lot of different sources and things that needed to be addressed. The last one, a beach up along Raritan Bay. You see this area, you have this beach, there's a creek that runs out next to it. That basically is a creek that went through a pipe that then they tied stormwater into. Every time it rained, that beach was closing. We went in again, working with Atlantic Highlands, working with Monmouth County Health Department and Road Department. We identified, we sampled from manholes, we sampled from all over the place, and we isolated the problem to this red area because everything intersected here before it went out to that one pipe. What we found was we did a dye test. We plugged one end of a sanitary line, acted like inflow and infiltration of a rain event, fire hose and dye. We put it into the system, and with it plugged up, that inflow and infiltration was making it underground, showing up 150 feet up from the intersection in the stormwater system. So we were able to go back to the town. They were able to sleeve that line. And then the rest of that summer, the beach was fine. Atlantic Highlands now through SRF funds is doing a lot of work in their whole sewage infrastructure because it was old, as was mentioned earlier. So they're taking care of that and they're working on it. So the key points, there's a lot of sources, both MS4 and nonpoint. You need to base it on the data that we have. And you have to look for those potential sources to help identify where your best actions to take are going to be. And it's going to take a lot of collaboration of all the interested parties. And there's my contact info.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I appreciate having the case studies filled in, you know, and having them actually be success stories as well, because
Yeah.
one of the other things that Dan mentioned this morning was that we do a lot of great work, but we do a lot of great work, but it's not always that the intent is not there to monitor whether they had an impact or not, or that we don't think they did, but it's often difficult, whether it's bandwidth or funding, et cetera. So appreciate that. We've got one simple online only question, or just only one online that's simple. So I'll throw that first, and that is, where can we find the NRCS watershed assessments that were performed in NJ?
In New Jersey, I would go to the NRCS website and look under National Water Quality Initiative. And I'm not sure if they're there, but if that person would like, they can contact me at tell her 212-637.
We'll show here, but you're
3700.
yeah, Donna's contact will be in the.
Yeah, please, and
yeah.
we'll find it for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Donna. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, please.
So the water standard recommendations from the EPA are decades old. Are there any efforts to review those suggestions, recommendations on water quality? I know they're specific to certain areas, not only in the country, but narrowing down the states and certain watersheds. I just wanted to know, is there any effort towards updating?
Well,
I'll just repeat the question just in case for virtual folks, and that is a lot of the standards that we follow for water quality are potentially or definitely old but potentially outdated. So is there anywhere we're focusing to update that?
so water quality standards have two different types, basically a numeric and a qualitative. And the state can actually make those more stringent if they wanted to. I work with a girl who does water quality standards, and we're talking about coral reefs right now, but I think they're always trying to make them better. I know that New Jersey and New York shared Greenwood Lake, for instance. They had two different TMDLs, two different TMDLs. One was more stringent than the other, and I can't recall, but that's just an example of, how a state can take
Yeah.
the initiative.
And
Just asking for the EPA recommendation because a lot of the TMDL state recommendations are based off of EPA standard
Mhm.
recommendations. So I know that's why those standards were created so that states could make those
Right.
TMDL recommendations.
yeah, and I can give like one example. I mean, the agency does look at its standards, and there are some that do get updated from time to time. Good example is the fecal coliform to E. coli. That has been changed. It used to be fecal coliform, and now it's been changed to the E. coli as the identifying bacteria. And then it's also up, with this, working with the states will, promulgate their standards that meet at least the federal requirement. They can go even more stringent than that, as Donna has said. So,
And then they have it for fresh water and they have it for salt water, and it's a lot. We need more people.
Thank you.
Yeah. Speak as loudly as you can.
Mike,
yes.
so one mini question, one ask question. Is there a possibility of getting the bioretention design handbook in a hard copy? Just because I go into schools a lot and it would be easier to kind of like have a hard copy.
Yeah, I can give you my contact, and because it was hard enough for me to get a copy, so
Hard
we
enough.
we could work on that.
And then my actual question. So I'm working right now with the Rutgers Water Resource Program and implementation of green infrastructure.
With
at
Chris
two
Abrupta?
Rutgers elementary schools. And one of the issues we have regularly is not the design of the things, but the implementation in terms of getting subcontractors that know what they're doing in regards to green infrastructure. Is there any resources for contractors, for any kind of landscapers or anything like that, that I can kind of direct them to? Because they want to help, but they don't really necessarily have the first step into knowing what to do.
Yeah, and I mean, on our nonpoint source website at EPA, there's a lot of resources. I would also recommend this handbook. That is also another, a lot of good resources, because this gets into more of the nitty gritty, not only with design, but also a little bit with implementation. But we can exchange information, and I can, get you more information.
And I'll just add, there are some resources out there, in a lot of areas. You're kind of, for instance, us, where, we run training programs because we're trying to just increase that. It's a general issue. And also there are some technologies, if you're going towards like the permeable surfaces, et cetera, that either no one in your area works with, or there's only one or two, that are specific. But the one that does jump to mind, though, is if you look for certification programs, like the Society for Ecological Restoration, they do the SERP certifications, and potentially even CBLP, the Chesapeake Bay Training Program. I think that they will list, the people that have at least gone through some training and received the certificate, and you could probably cross-check that if they're in your area. But it's an issue, yeah. So it's something that we're always trying to do, increase training.
You're already working with Rutgers, and I believe, Chris Abrupta runs Green Infrastructure Champions
Yeah,
Program.
Yeah, that was,
Okay.
but yeah, but I feel that it's more.
It's more general.
It's more general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's for shoves in the ground.
Mhm.
But thank
Anything else?
For the person who asked the initial question
Yeah.
about not in the NRCS.
Yeah.
The one that we did in New Jersey was the Salem,
Salem County.
yeah, Salem County and Cohansey watersheds, just for her. It should be on the website.
Great,
And if
thank you.
not, she can.
Mike.
This clarification, you have, you within a town, you have developers that tie into the stormwater system running through the town, or you may have a direct, development that you right next to a water body that you direct in the village. is a direct discharge still considered part of the municipal system?
A direct discharge to the water body?
Yeah.
Well, if you have it could be a non-point source, but I mean, if it's, especially in New Jersey, it takes off a different role. I'm not sure I understand it.
Yeah, let me just try to clarify. You're asking if your underground infrastructure connects and maybe it coincides with other drainage or from other towns and then it discharges to a water body. Is that under your MS4?
System, you may have developments that are in this, that are right next to the water.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Straight into it.
Okay.
Is that still part of the?
There'd be a permit involved.
It's probably a
Direct discharge.
permitted, it's probably a permitted.
If it is direct discharge, there would be a permit. There would be a
It's
permit.
supposed to
from
be
the state.
permitted. Yeah, to direct discharge without a permit is definitely illicit. And that's our time, everyone. So thank you. Thank our
Thank you
speakers
very
again,
much.
please. Thank you.